North Korea is called the Hermit Kingdom because it's extremely isolated and secretive. The only way to get out is if you have money, connections, or like in this case, you have a death wish. In the freezing silence of a North Korean winter, 17-year-old Min Yang stepped onto the brittle ice of the Yalu River. Every crack beneath her feet was a warning. Every shadow behind her a threat. She wasn't just escaping a country. She was fleeing a regime built on fear, surveillance and silence. This was her last chance. If she turned back, the icy grip of the past would tighten around her. If she moved forward, uncertainty lay ahead, a vast unknown that chilled her more than the winter wind. Ahead of her was a 230-mile journey into the freezing waters of the Yalu River towards China, a country she knew little about except for what she heard in hushed whispers, stories of a land where people weren't just free, they were free to choose. Their leaders free to speak their minds and free to dream their own dreams. It sounded like a fairy tale. And yet here she was, stepping into the unknown, driven by the faint echoes of that distant melody. This was not just another escape story. This was Min Yang's story. Min Yang was born in the border city of Hassan, the last stop before the Yalu River. Growing up, her world was small, enclosed by the watchful gaze of the state, the grey concrete buildings of her apartment complex, and the constant hum of propaganda. Her life was a series of do's and don'ts, all designed to keep her inside the lines, to keep her from straying too far from the tightly controlled narrative of her country. The great leader was godlike, the government infallible, and questioning anything was akin to questioning the sky. If you were caught listening to a BBC broadcast, you could be sent to one of North Korea's political prison camps, where people vanished without a trace. The mere whisper of discontent could send ripples of fear through an entire neighborhood. If someone was taken away in the middle of the night, it was better not to ask questions. It was safer to pretend to be ignorant. You didn't know what happened to them. You didn't know where they went. You didn't know why. You just pretended to be ignorant. For many, ignorance was bliss. For some, it was survival. But for Min Yang, ignorance was a cage of her own. When Min Yang was young, her family shielded her from the harsh realities of their world. They sang her songs about bravery, told her stories about a magical land called the free world, and made sure her eyes were filled with wonder rather than fear. But as she grew older, the cracks in her world began to show. Whispers turned to shouts. Shadows took on menacing shapes, and the walls seemed to close in on her. She couldn't breathe in this suffocating atmosphere of fear and lies anymore. At 16, she started working at a restaurant frequented by foreigners. One day, she overheard a conversation. The word democracy was thrown around, and Min Yang felt as though a bomb had exploded in her head. What was democracy? Why did the foreigners talk about it so passionately? That day, she began her journey from ignorance to awareness, from obedience to curiosity. And it all started with a single question. What is democracy? The answer she found in smuggled South Korean dramas, in the stolen glances of lovers, in the laughter of children, and in the hushed voices of those who dared to dream of a different life. She saw how people in these shows talked back to authority, chose their leaders, and even criticized them. The concept was so foreign to her, so alien that it both frightened and fascinated her. Was it really possible? Could people be so brazen? Could they challenge the system? And most importantly, could she? It was also during this time that Min Yang developed a habit of walking along the banks of the Yalu River. Here, on the frozen banks of the river, she felt a sense of freedom that she craved. The wind whipping across her face was music to her ears, the sound of freedom. The only thing that disturbed this symphony of liberation was the wide, impassable river separating her from China. There she would stand for hours, staring at the swirling water, dreaming of a life on the other side. But then everything changed. A new directive came down from the government. Foreigners were no longer allowed to visit Hazen. Min Yang lost her window to the outside world. Suddenly, the river seemed like an unbreachable wall. She was trapped in a world of her own making, surrounded by secrets and lies. Fear became her constant companion. Every shadow seemed to hold a secret policeman. Every stranger was a potential informant. She couldn't even cry. Not in public, not even at home. Tears were seen as a sign of weakness, and weakness had no place in her world. She was taught to be strong, resilient, even if it meant burying her emotions deep inside. But her luck ran out when she got caught listening to a BBC broadcast. A neighbor reported her, and soon she was summoned to the local government office. The stern faces of the officials, the cold, hard questions, and the final verdict, "You will be sent to a labor camp," echoed in her ears long after she was dragged out of the building. As she looked up, she saw the familiar figure of her neighbor, his face impassive, his eyes betraying nothing. Betrayed. Traitor. These words spun in Minyang's head like a broken record. How could she have been so naive? How could she have trusted him? But now there was no time for regrets. She needed a plan, and she needed it fast. She managed to bribe a guard, enabling her to flee the city. She followed the East Coast Road south, hoping to find a way out of the country. She walked day and night, surviving on what little food she had. She hid in caves, blending in with the rocks during the day, and venturing out at night to avoid being spotted. She was hunted, and the stakes were her life. One night, risking everything, she approached a group of Chinese tourists. With a mixture of sign language and broken Chinese, she managed to explain her situation. They agreed to help her, guiding her away from the tourist traps and into the maze of an underground network that helped North Koreans escape. In the bustling cities of northeastern China, Minyang learned to navigate the shadows, changing hotels every few days, adopting different aliases, and trying to blend in. However, the Chinese police were hot on her trail. They had shoot-and-sight orders for North Korean defectors. She became a ghost, haunting the neon-lit streets, always looking over her shoulder, always ready to run. After months of perilous journeys and close calls, she reached the Thai-Myanmar border. From there, she intended to cross into India, which has a large North Korean community, but her luck ran out again. She was arrested while crossing the border and taken to a detention center. The next few weeks were a blur: interrogation, deportation, hunger, thirst. But through it all, something kept her going: the faint hope of freedom. Finally, she was handed over to the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. After 6 months of legal battles, she was granted asylum and resettled in South Korea. As Minyang stepped into the South Korean embassy in Southeast Asia, tears streamed down her face, tears of joy, relief, gratitude. For the first time in her life, someone told her, "You are safe." But as the adrenaline rush of her escape wore off, the reality of her situation hit her hard. She was alone in a strange country, unable to speak the language, with no one to turn to. The weight of her new identity pressed heavily on her shoulders. No turning back now. She had crossed the river, survived the journey, and now she had to build a new life. Slowly, with the help of social services, she began to piece her life together. She enrolled in language classes, got a job, and slowly started to make friends. Yet despite her new life, the pull of her past remained strong. The faces of those left behind, the fear, the uncertainty, the hope, they haunted her dreams. Despite the danger, she continued to smuggle information across the border. She worked with activists who relayed messages of hope and information to those in the north. Her voice, once silenced, became a weapon. She gave interviews to international media outlets, sharing her story to keep the world aware of the plights of North Koreans. Today, Minyang lives a life of purpose. She is a symbol of hope for many, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. She is living proof that even in the darkest of winters, the human spirit can brave the harshest of conditions to reach the shores of freedom. Her story serves as a reminder that the fight for freedom is a universal one, and that the courage to face one's fears and fight for what one believes in knows no bounds. The girl who once walked across a frozen river has become a beacon of light for those still languishing in the darkness of oppression. And as long as her voice rings clear, there is hope that one day the shackles of fear will be broken and the song of freedom will echo across the frozen wastes of the Yalu River. The biggest risk is not taking any risk at all. Do you think you could do what Minyang did? Leave a comment below. Also, remember to subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon to get notified when we release new videos.